Story 1. When I was 18 years old, I was looking for a new cell phone on an online marketplace. I had heard that this site wasn't always reliable, but it was the cheapest place I knew to buy a smartphone. I managed to get my hands on one of them. The first 3 phones had broken a few days earlier, and I wanted to get a new one as soon as possible. That's when one of the products caught my eye. Its price was quite low. I thought it was a great bargain, but at that point, I was still desperate. So I contacted the seller. We agreed to meet the same day. Everything seemed to be in order. However, half an hour before the appointment, he asked if he could reschedule the meeting a few hours later than originally planned. I agreed, but by then, it was already 7 p.m. And I was a little annoyed because I live in northern latitudes. It's winter there, and it gets dark early. I told my parents I was going shopping and would be back in a little while. If I told my parents what happened, they wouldn't understand me. I was being unreasonable, even though I knew it was wrong to lie. Anyway, what can I say? In the midst of it all, I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. It was about 8 p.m. at the time, so it's no surprise that it was dark outside. I live in an urban area, and frankly, I think that added some tension. After some time had passed, I got a notification on my cell phone. It was a message from him. I don't remember his name, so from now on, I will call him Jack. The message said that he wanted to meet me at his house, not the cafe we had talked about earlier. The moment I stood at his door, I felt like something was wrong. I really wanted to relax because I was already upset that he had rescheduled our meeting. I didn't want to leave empty-handed and just leave. But going to his house that night was a big mistake. When I walked in, I was not in a good mood. I couldn't figure out exactly how I felt, but it was unusual for me, an 18-year-old woman who had become more cautious and experienced. The house was dark, and it was in a small town with few other houses. I went to the door and hesitated. I wondered if I should go in, but I couldn't refuse and rang the doorbell. I wish I had turned around and left as soon as the dubious thought came up. When he opened the door, he introduced himself to me. He offered to come in and check out all the devices before buying. I agreed and went inside. He handed me a box of merchandise and add-ons. He handed me a box of add-ons to look through. Controllers, games, and the necessary wires. He asked me if I wanted to come in and see if everything was okay before I left. He mentioned that my caregivers were gone, and if I didn't come home, it wouldn't cause a problem. He hinted at me staying with him overnight. Of course, I refused and immediately tried to leave. After that, his eyes filled with anger. I was so frightened that he instantly grabbed my arm, trying to drag me back into the house. I quickly recoiled and ran screaming toward my car. Even though I was running fast, I don't think I'd ever run so fast in my life. It must have taken me a while to get to my car. After all, I had to run up the stairs, and it was dark. I was alert and didn't fall. He wasn't in the best shape and age. I didn't even think he could catch up with me just by looking at him. As I ran to the car, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack. He yelled at me, calling me different names and telling me I was lucky to be alive. Otherwise, I would have ended up in his basement begging for help. I didn't look back and left without looking back. Now that I think about it, maybe his house was abandoned, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm just glad I'm safe. To this day, I still often dream about that nightmare. I never told anyone about it before, and since then, I don't want to talk about it, especially in front of my guardians. That night, I learned an important lesson that I will never forget. Story 2. That evening, I decided to buy a gaming chair on Craigslist and found a suitable ad. I contacted the seller, and we arranged to meet in the parking lot outside the store. I felt excitement, as this was my first transaction on a site like this. I'd arrived at the parking lot on time, but the seller was late. I waited for him for about half an hour until he finally arrived in his bus. I approached him, and he asked me to get in the car to inspect the chair. However, I didn't want to get in the car, so the salesman started coaxing me. I felt something was wrong and asked the salesman to take the chair out so I could examine it. But suddenly the salesman's phone rang and he started talking on it. At that time, I noticed a strange shadow coming from a streetlight near our car. Fear gripped me, and I knew I had to get out of here as soon as possible. I told the clerk I had to go to the bathroom and disappeared around the corner of the store. I quickly got out on the road and ran as fast as I could. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it beating in my chest, but I was grateful to be able to get away from these people. Situations like this are unusual for me, and I didn't know what to do. I was shocked and felt defenseless. After this incident, I was so scared that I decided never to use the classifieds websites to find things from individuals again. I realized that there was a risk of running into people who didn't have the best of intentions. I also thought it would be better to make appointments in public places where there are people and security cameras so I wouldn't run into dangerous situations. In the end, I wasn't able to buy the game chair I was looking for, but I was thankful that I was able to avoid danger and keep my life. This incident taught me to be cautious and to be more careful when making arrangements to meet strangers. I also shared my story with my friends to warn them about the risks associated with buying from individuals online. A few days later, I learned from the news about several kidnapping cases in our city. Police warned that the kidnappers worked in threes and pretended to be sellers of things. They would make appointments in deserted places and then kidnap people. I realized that I could have been one of their victims if I hadn't run away in time. This story taught me to be more careful when I meet strangers and transact online. I now always check the seller's information and the meeting place. It has also made it easier for me to say no if something seems suspicious.